Hello, I am life coach Sharika Dunstan, and this is the Peace, Purpose, and Prosperity podcast. Today, I am joined by a very special guest, Dr. Ryan Lang. Dr. Lang is not only a doctor, like a whole medical doctor, y'all, but also a certified life coach and an actor. How are you, Dr. Lang?
I'm great, Coach Rika. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for showing up here. I'm so honored to have you as a guest. So, today we will be discussing purpose. And, as a certified life coach, and you specialize in helping millennials, how do you define purpose?
Well, thank you for that question. And again, thank you for having me on your podcast. It's such an honor. And I would definitely say that purpose is basically what drives you in everything that you do. I think that purpose is not only relegated to one's career. I think a lot of times we think about purpose as what do I do for a living or what do I do to bring in money? And I think that purpose is so much bigger than that. I think that purpose can shine through every interaction, whether it's with your friends, your family, your neighbors, people who you work with. And I think that as you get clear on what it is that your purpose is, I think that you'll find ways to embody that and to show that in every single thing that you do.
I love how you said your purpose isn't only about your career. I'm a millennial too, and we are some really career focused, career driven individuals. So it's hard sometimes to think about, having a purpose outside of what you do for a living.
Absolutely. And I will say that that was definitely the case for me as well. And as you had mentioned, my background is a medical doctor. And I think that for a lot of people who pursue that career path, I think that they put a lot of their purpose within, their occupation, and for me as well, like I, attributed a lot of my purpose before in terms of that career path that I chose. And I think in the process of getting more clear on what my purpose is, I began to see that, one aspect of my life and my identity is just a small part of, what my full life purpose is.
I love that. So, how did you find your purpose, Dr. Ryan?
Well, I will say that the last year and a half or 2 years was hugely transformational in terms of me finding my own life purpose. And one of the things that I've realized is that, over the last couple of years, I've gone through some major life transitions. And I will say that in the course of going through those life transitions, and, just to give a few examples for your audience, I identify as queer and non binary. And for me, in becoming more aware of and comfortable with my identity, that caused some shifts in some relationships. And in going through that experience of experiencing those shifts, I became a lot clearer in terms of what really were some of my primary values. What are the things that I wanted to exemplify? And in the course of going through that, I came around to realizing how much creative expression is such a huge, huge part of my purpose. And as you mentioned as well, I act and I've been engaged in acting. And really, I would say if it wasn't for, the experience, the downs, of having those relational shifts, the experience of not really knowing for sure whether the initial career path that I was in and making some small changes along the way there, going through that as well kind of helped me to get clear and to say, what is it that I really love? What is it that I really want? What have I been pushing down for years, and now I have this opportunity to let it out, to let it show. And I will say that in the course of those life transitions, creative expression, became such a huge, huge part of who I am. And that awareness of creative expression being a huge part of who I am became even more even greater over the last couple of years. So I will definitely say that, in everything that I do now, I want to make sure that I infuse my creativity, and whether that's in my day job, whether that's in, acting as I love to do as well, or whether it's, in using my platform as a coach, I really, really am focused on how I can infuse creativity into that.
I want to thank you for one, for sharing so much with us and being so transparent. We don't expect doctors to share their lives, honestly. We're not used to that. So I just want to honor you for that. And what I heard you saying is that, on your journey to find purpose, you honestly uncovered your true identity and started living authentically as yourself. That's
Yes.
huge. That's major.
And you know what? I will say, and thank you for that. And I will say that one of the things that I realized as I went through my journey was how much I attached my sense of purpose, my sense of value to what other people thought. And in the process of getting clear for myself in what I value, that meant that I had to get comfortable with pursuing that which perhaps may not make other people comfortable. And even as you were saying, in terms of sharing my story, being a doctor, and then also sharing the personal aspects of who I am, I can imagine there are a lot of people out there who are like, I don't want to know that about my doctor. I don't want to know that about, that particular type of person. But in being the full version of who I am, I had to get comfortable with saying, this is who I am. These are all the parts of who I am, and not allow the fear of how that might be received stop me from continuing to live in my full and authentic self.
I love it. As a life coach myself, I'm always encouraging people to show up fully as themselves, no matter what other people think. Like, just be yourself. And, since you're a life coach as well, I'm sure your clients appreciate your transparency. And, it's easier to listen and to trust a life coach who has gone through their own transformations and their own journeys to purpose than someone who's like, oh, okay, I got this certification and now I'm going to coach you, but I've never gone through something. It's the authenticity that makes the difference, I believe.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. And I've definitely lived quite a bit. I've gone through quite a bit, and as I was saying, over the last couple of years, gone through so many major life transitions. Whether it's career, relationships, as I had mentioned before. So I think through all of those experiences, have picked up some major lessons along the way that, absolutely I want to be able to impart, as I embark on coaching as well.
So, listeners, make sure you hire a coach that has actually lived. That's important. You'll get the
Yeah.
best out of them. Um, so, thank you for that. So, what would you tell our listeners who are seeking their own purpose? What advice would you give them?
So I would say that in the course of finding your purpose, it's important to realize that every moment is purposeful. And I think that one of the things that is easy to do is to get lost in the process of looking for your purpose and not understand how every moment that you're in right now is in some way preparing you for what that purpose is. So getting clear for yourself on what those things are. What are those lessons that are there to teach you something for a reason? And how can you use that to propel you towards your purpose? So I would definitely encourage your listeners to be mindful, to take that opportunity for a reflection frequently in order to understand, how is this moment, how is this experience preparing me? Whether I know my purpose, my life purpose, my overarching purpose or not. What can I learn? What can I gain from this? And briefly, I'll say that, in my experience as a physician, and tying that into my path as a coach as well, I gained some skills as it relates to empathy, and also in advocacy. I worked and took care of patients who many times were underserved. And having that experience really helped me to understand other people's points of view, understand the challenges that they had that I might not have personal experience in. But in talking to them and providing care for them, I then have a better understanding of what are their challenges. And I think that those skills and those experiences, even though I didn't realize it at the time, were very purposeful in preparing me for my path as a coach. So I would just say for your listeners as well, really pay close attention to each moment, each relationship, each event in your life, and try to think, what purpose does this event have? And, document that, write it down, journal, so that you can reflect back on that at a time in the future and say, oh, that's why I went through that, to help prepare me in this way for that outcome.
That is genius, the fact that you said every moment has purpose. I think people get really caught up in, just finding that overarching life purpose, but it's so important to be mindful of the purpose in every moment. As I like to say, there's like a blessing in every lesson. So even like the hard things that happen, there was a purpose behind that. It is propelling you forward into something. You needed this lesson to get to
Yeah.
the next stage of your life.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. A blessing in every lesson. I'm going to keep that.
Yes, use it. So, to transition a little bit, but it's not a huge transition, let's talk about your new book, Project Reset, that was released in December 2020, right?
Right.
So, tell the listeners about your book.
Yes. So the book Project Reset, I worked on as essentially a guide to provide individuals a framework of how they can make authentic transformation happen in their lives. And I used examples from my own experience. I talked a little bit about that already. And really, I distilled it down into three major lessons that or strategies that I think that people can take away as they embark upon their own life reset. Now, a life reset can be in any area of one's life. And I talk about that in the book. I talk about a life reset is an intentional way of, living and creating a life that is a more authentic representation of you. So, that can be in terms of career, that can be in terms of relationships, that can be, personal expression or any other area of life. And I think that, over the course of this year, a lot of people, this past year, I should say 2020, a lot of people went through some major transitions, as I did as well. And I think that in the midst of those transitions, it really offered a space to figure out, okay, what's working well, what's not working well, and what can I do about it right now? So it really offered a once in a lifetime opportunity to pause and to say, okay, I really want this. Now, how can I go for it? And that book, the book that I wrote, is all about giving the tools to go for it.
I love that. And I must share that, in fall 2020, you were working on an Instagram live series on reset, and I watched, I think, two of the episodes, and I was so intrigued because I was working on the ultimate reset workshop
Yeah.
series with my own clients. I'm like, this is crazy, we're on
Yeah.
the same wavelength.
Yes, yes. And I loved it so much. Because I think that you're right. We definitely are on the same wavelength. And we talked before as well that, there are other people as well who, were focused on that same theme of a reset. And I think that, 2020 in so many ways it gave us that opportunity to really think about how we can reset, reset in so many areas. And why not make a life reset? Why not use this opportunity to make a life reset? So that's what it's all about.
Yes, and as a physician, I know you know all about the global pandemic and how it has honestly reset everyone's life at this point. Um, and I was talking with another guest of the show, And, we talked about how the pandemic is actually giving us a chance to focus on areas of our lives that we probably didn't have time to focus on before because we were so busy with the hustle and bustle of living.
Mm-hmm.
But now people do have time to read books like Project Reset. They do have time to, reflect on their personal life journeys. They have time to think about the transformations they want to make in their lives. So, yes, horrible things have happened during this global pandemic. We acknowledge that. But
Mm-hmm.
also, there have been times and things that have happened to help us,
Mm-hmm.
push forward. One day we won't be living in a pandemic, but the time we're taking now to work on ourselves will serve us well when the pandemic is over.
Right, right. Going back to what you said, every blessing, there's a blessing in every lesson, and every moment is purposeful. Like the events of last year, as painful as they were for so many people, there's purpose in that. And I think if we can try to, take time for self-reflection, which, as you said, this period has allowed us, pause. The book is short, so you have time to get through it quickly, to grab those tools and run with them. But yes, I absolutely agree. There is opportunity in what we went through.
Yes. So, speaking of your book, how can our listeners actually purchase it?
I'm so glad you asked that. So the book is available both in paperback and ebook formats, and your listeners can go to Amazon. They can go to Barnes and Noble online, or they can go to Kobo in order to purchase either of those versions. And the book is also available on my website, the ebook version, which is Dr. Ryan Lang. That's drryanlang.com. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, you can have a direct link for my profile there in order to get the book as well. My profile is at Black Millennial Coach. So I would love to have your listeners to grab a copy and yeah, start their life reset today.
Yes. And I will make sure that I put all of your links to your website, to your Instagram profile, to your book, of course, available in the description for this podcast, because I think it's really important that our listeners support you and that they work on their life reset.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that.
You're welcome. So, as we conclude this episode of the Peace, Purpose, and Prosperity podcast, are there any final words or any words of advice you would like to leave with our listeners?
I think that, as we were just talking about, 2020 was very difficult. And I think that there's a lot of cynicism in the air around what we can actually accomplish in 2021. Understandably, we're not out of the pandemic yet. There's still, quite a while before we get back to life, as we knew it before. But I think there's still lots of opportunity. And I think there is a chance for each of us to really use this time in a way that can really help to propel us forward if we pay attention, if we continue to reflect, and if we use the lessons that we've learned in order to make tomorrow a better day. So I believe that each of your listeners are powerful and each of them can make moves happen. So I want them to keep the faith, and I want them to, allow the space that we're in now, to allow them to be intentional about what they can do to make their life reset happen.
I love it. And I will add that, I think you are an inspiration and you should inspire the listeners to do the most with their purpose. I mean, you are proof that you can be a physician, you can be a life coach, you can be an actor, you can use your creativity in multiple ways to do the most in your life.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan Lang. And thank you, listeners, for listening in to the second episode of the Peace, Purpose, and Prosperity podcast.